Alright, welcome back to another Maya 2016 tutorial. In this video I'm going to be modeling a robot arm similar to what you see here, and we're also going to be rigging it so that it has a little bit of motion to it, so we can move it around kind of like what you see right there. So I'll be showing you how to parent those objects to one another. And to get started, we'll just start with a new scene and click on this cylinder. And we want to set the subdivisions on this cylinder down to 12, and we will set the height of the cylinder to 0.2. And then if you want to, you can translate this on the y-axis up 0.1, and that gets it even with the grid. The bottom of the cylinder will be level with the grid. And from here, we want to go into face mode, and go ahead and click on your modeling toolkit and make sure that you have camera based selection turned on. You want this checkbox right here to be checked. That will prevent you from grabbing faces on the other side of the object. But once you've got that and you're in face mode, we're going to select all of these faces on top of the cylinder. I'm going to press Control E to extrude, and I'm going to bring this up just a little bit and press R to scale, and I'm going to scale these faces in, and this will form the base plate for our robot arm, and that gives it sort of a beveled edge. The next thing we want to do is choose the selection tool and click on the cube. I'm going to add a cube to the scene. I'm going to press W and move this up where I can see it. Then I'm going to press R to scale, and I'm going to shrink this down. There's no specific value here, we just want a nice thin plate. And I'm going to bring that down until it's flush with our base plate there. So just like that. And then press R to scale. And we want to, well, I'll go back into object mode. I'm going to take this red square, which is the x-axis, and I'm going to scale this in until it forms more of a rectangular shape. And once you've got that, choose the selection tool again. We're going to go into edge mode, click on mesh tools, and go down to where it says insert edge loop and click this box on the side. You want to set these options up just like I have it right here. We'll be using a multiple edge loop, and we'll set the number of edge loops to 2. Once you have that, click on one of these edges of that cube, and you should have 2 edge loops there. And I'm going to press R and scale these out just like that. And this is going to form the bracket for our robot arm. Once you've got that, you can close out the edge loop tool, choose the selection tool or press Q, and we're going into face mode. We want to select these 2 faces out on the end of our bracket. Press Control E to extrude, and extrude these straight up until they form a square surface right about. Doesn't have to be perfect, but somewhere in there. And then I will press Control E again and extrude this up a little bit more. Press R to scale, and I'm going to scale these in to form sort of a beveled edge. And I'll repeat that process one more time. Extrude up, and then R to scale, scale that in just a little bit more than I did last time, That gives me a nice beveled edge for this bracket. Okay, so that does it for the bracket. We want to form a pivot point for the robot arm. So bring in a new cube and close out the modeling toolkit if you haven't already. We want to set the subdivisions down to 10, and we will set the radius to 0.2. And it looks like I need to rotate this guy. So I will rotate this on the, is that the Z-axis? The X-axis. I'll rotate this on the X-axis by 90 degrees. And bring it up until it is positioned right in the middle of this bracket. And then press R to scale, and we want to scale this in until the edge is just outside of that bracket. So just like that. Once you've got that there, we want to go back into face mode, and we will select all of the faces on this end, hold down Shift, and select all the faces on the other end. So we have the faces on both ends of the cube. That will make all of our next operations symmetric. So press Ctrl E to extrude, and immediately press R to scale. And we will scale this out to form what looks like a spider web, just like that. And you can see it does it on both sides. Then press Ctrl E again to extrude. And this forms something like a bolt head. So we'll extrude that out about like that. Then I'm going to scale it in just to bevel it a little bit. And then I will extrude a second time. And then press R and bevel that in as well, just a little bit more than I did on the previous surface. So that gives us a nice beveled bolt head there for our pivot point. And we will return to edge mode and go to mesh tools, choose the insert edge loop again, and select one of these edges right in the middle here. That gives us 2 new edge loops. And we want to bring these out a little bit closer to the edge. So I picked the scale tool and I'm scaling these out. About right there. Basically this will form the width of the robot arm. So once you've got that, we'll go back into face mode, choose the selection tool and select face mode, and select these top 3 faces. Now if you don't have a face pointing straight up right here, maybe you have a line pointing straight up, one of these edges here, you need to rotate this cylinder 90 degrees. But if you followed everything I've done exactly, you should have a face pointing straight up here. So we'll take that center face and one of the faces on either side, just like this. Press Ctrl E to extrude, and then click this guy right here so that we're extruding uniformly straight up. And we'll bring this section up however long you want this section of your robot arm to be. You don't want it too tall because it becomes awkward to work with, but you do want a little bit of length to it. So something like that should be good. And then press R, and I'm going to scale this until the end is completely flat. And once you've got the end faces flat, just press delete. And it should look like an empty cereal box right there. Okay, the next thing we want to do is go back into object mode and select this object. And I'm going to choose the selection tool. Hold down Control and press D, that means duplicate, then press W, and we'll move that duplicated object up just above the original. And then we will rotate this guy. I'm going to go for -90 degrees on the x-axis and bring it up a little bit more, just like that. Okay, so we're going to weld these two pieces together to form the bottom half of the robot arm. So position it right there, hold down right click and go back into face mode, and we will select all of these faces that are extruded out of the bottom of that cylinder. So if you've got all those selected, press delete, return to object mode, and select this cylinder, press W and drag it straight down until it is almost touching the lower part of the robot arm. You want a small amount of space right between the two of them, so just like that would work out fine. Once you've got that, hold down Shift and select the robot arm. So now I've selected both this duplicated object and the original object. Go up to this mesh menu and click on combined, and that makes it both one object. The next thing we want to do is fix this gap. So click on the target welder tool, which is right up here, and that should put you in vertex mode. And sometimes this is easier if you go into wireframe view, so you can click on this box right here. Just be careful that you don't grab any vertices that you don't want to grab. What we want to do is weld this piece to the cylinder above it. And to do that, I'm going to click on that vertex and then drag straight up to the vertex directly above it and let go. So grab this bottom piece with the left click, drag it straight up, and we weld those two together. I'm going to do that on all four corners. And then I can go inside the cylinder here and weld these down. Because we really don't need these on the inside. Okay? So after you've got those welded, go back into shaded view and look this thing over real carefully. Make sure you didn't weld anything that you didn't want to. If you did, press Ctrl Z until it's fixed and then try again. But if you were successful, we can move on. So click the selection tool and click on, well, we're going to go back into object mode and then click on this lower bracket here. We're going to duplicate it as well. So hold down Control and press D and press W and bring it up just above the arm, and we'll do that one more time. Control D and move it up. And the second piece, I want to rotate it 180 degrees. And on my screen, I think I'm going to rotate on the Z axis. So that's this third box. Rotate 180 degrees. That worked out pretty well. I'm going to bring it up until it is almost flush with the bracket above it. Just like that. And I'm going to use that same welding technique that we just used on the arm. So click on the target welder. and very carefully weld. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a step. Go back into object mode. We want to make both of these objects one. So click on one, hold shift and click on the other, and then click mesh and click combined. Now we can use the target welder. So I'll take the target welder, I'll start on the bottom and I go up, one vertex at a time. And remember, if you start at the bottom and you weld up, stick with that same pattern, otherwise it's going to warp up your object. So if you start at the bottom and go up, just stick with that. And weld all of these vertices all the way around. That completely makes this one object. Now we can go back into object mode, choose the selection tool, press W, and we can't see the move arrow. The move arrow is way down here where the pivot point is. That's because this object was duplicated from our bottom bracket. But if you zoom out, you can grab that and bring it down into place, just like that right there. Now, to fix the position of our pivot point here, we can press the space bar and go into front view and press insert on the keyboard, and that allows you to drag this pivot point anywhere you want it. I'm going to drag it straight up until it is centered directly in this bolt piece of our cylinder. So that way when this bracket pivots, it pivots on this point. And I will select the arm and do the same thing. I will move the pivot point for the arm up until into this lower bolt pin, or whatever you want to call it, right there. And might as well do the same thing for the bracket. Okay, once you've got that, we're ready to move on. Choose the selection tool, select the arm piece and duplicate it. I may have duplicated more than once. Duplicate the arm and drag it straight up. And if you're still in the front view, it will allow you to position this. You can look at about how far this one is away from the end of the bracket and position this one in the same manner. And once you've got that where you want it, take the selection tool and select the bracket at the very bottom one more time. Duplicate it, bring it up above the top of the arm here, and we need to rotate it 180 degrees. So I'm going to rotate that on the Z-axis by 180 and then drag it down in place on this pin. And if you don't feel comfortable working in the front view, you can go back to perspective view, but this makes it easy for me personally to get everything lined up. Once you've got that lined up, choose the selection tool again, and we're going to choose the bottom base plate. Press Ctrl D to duplicate, press W to move. We're going to drag it up above that end bracket. We want a fair amount of space here so we can work with the bottom faces here in just a minute. But while you've got it right there, go ahead and press R to scale, and I'm going to select this middle square here and scale this in uniformly. And now I'm going to have to leave the front view, go back to either the perspective view or the top view. We want to scale this until it just covers our arm piece. So about right there. Smaller than the base, but large enough that it covers the arm. And then I will return to perspective view here. Choose the selection tool and go into face mode. Select all of the faces on the bottom of this base plate, which is actually going to be our hand. Press Ctrl E and immediately press R. And we want to scale this part in, so just like that. You want to scale it in enough that when we extrude it like this, it will fit inside this square bracket here. So extrude that out just a little bit. Go back into object mode, and then we can move it down until it touches that bracket, just like that. And now I'm going to start with the base at the very bottom, and I'm going to name each one of these components. So you can type that in over here on the right. I'm going to call this the base plate. I'm going to call this the base bracket. I will call that the base arm. And just continue this process up there. It doesn't really matter what you call it so long as you know what it is. I'll call that the middle bracket, the forearm or the upper arm, the end bracket, and the hand. Okay, once everything's named, you can click on Windows, click on the outliner, and we want to parent each one of these components to each other so that if I move the bottom piece, everything moves, but if I move one of these top pieces, it moves independently. And so I'm going to start with the base plate over here. I want to make the base bracket a child of the base plate, and to do that I will hold down the middle mouse button, which is the mouse wheel, click and drag up to base plate, and then if you expand base plate you will see that the base bracket is now part of this hierarchy. We also want to take the base arm, click and hold down the middle mouse button, and make it a child of the base plate as well. So just drag it up there. And from here on out, each component will be a child of the piece that it is physically connected to. So our next piece here is the middle bracket. You can click on the middle bracket, hold down the middle mouse button and drag that up to the base arm. Expand it out and repeat that process. The forearm belongs to the middle bracket. The end bracket belongs to the forearm. And the hand belongs to the end bracket. And once you've got this established, you should be able to click on one of these components that is intended to pivot, and then press E to rotate. I will choose the selection tool here, press E to rotate, and you should be able to rotate these pieces, and the only part that moves is that piece and everything that is above it. but the bottom pieces will stay still. So we'll try it with that. There we go. Same thing here. So that's what setting up that hierarchy does for us. And you can even select the base plate down here and rotate it. Rotate it in the XZ plane, and everything should rotate with it. Okay? I'm going to press Control D a few times to back up out of here. Make sure everything is straight. Close out the outliner and choose the selection tool. Now we need some fingers for our robot, and to do that we're going to select the base of the arm, back up and press Control D to duplicate, and then press W to move, and move a duplicate of this arm up above the hand. Then you can press R to scale, and scale this down uniformly until it is the size of the robot finger. And you may want to change view, maybe go into top view. We want to fit 3 on here, so consider that when you're scaling it. I'm going to press W and move it over here. Go into change view into the front view. Move it down. Move it down until it's flush with the hand. Go back into top view. Once you've got it in position, you can press Control D to duplicate. Drag a copy of it over, and then duplicate one more time. Position the third finger as well. And then I'll return to perspective mode. We want to pull out the outliner again, so click on Windows, click on Outliner, and we want to make each of these 3 copies, and you can name them finger 1 and 2 and 3 if you want to. We want to make them a child of the hand. So we'll extend out our original hierarchy here, click on each one of these fingers and make it a child of the hand. So we remember to hold down the middle mouse button to do this. And once you've done that with all 3, you should be able to rotate the arm from any position, and all of the fingers will follow suit. And not only that, you can take one of these fingers and it will inherit the hierarchy, the same hierarchy our arm already has, so you can rotate the fingers individually as well. And you can position these guys however you want. So experiment a little bit with that, but that does it for the modeling in this video. If you've made it this far, well done. Go ahead and save your work, and we will texture this at a later date.